that are out there of extraterrestrial origin.
A large, hairy creature with arms that hang down beside bore down on its sides.
And I told him my name, and when I told him the name, he said he was called Code.
It was not anything from this earth that I'm quite sure of.
You're listening to the Strangeology podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Foran, and this is your place to explore the weird, strange, and unexplained. From cryptids and creatures, the paranormal, aliens and UFOs, forbidden knowledge, ancient mysteries, conspiracies, and more. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the show. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. Coming up on this edition of the Strangeology podcast is a discussion on researching and investigating cryptids live and in person with Nash Hoover of Chasing Legends. So it's been a pretty wild week here at Strangeology HQ. The re-entry after Monster Fest has just been, it's summer vacation for the kids, so it's been a little tough to get things done. But I wanted to do a quick recap of Monster Fest this past weekend. It happened at the DoubleTree by Hilton in Canton, Ohio on June 28th and 29th. It was a very long drive for me to get there from New England. I think it was about 12 hours. I ran into some detour traffic and you got to make a few stops. The directions always say nonstop. It's going to take like 10 hours or so, but yeah, it took me like 12, but that's to be expected. The event, the setup, I didn't get to do early, which was okay. I wound up going out to go grab some food once I was able to check into my hotel room with some of the cryptid crew, folks that I've come to know and love over the years of doing Strangeology, that many of them frequent these events. So that's always an awesome time. Now, Saturday morning was a mad dash to get everything set up. I want to give a special shout out to Michael Thompson, who helped me out in a pinch while I was trying to set up my t-shirt rack display. I had some missing object phenomenon happen to me, and I lost a few hinges and screws that were holding the thing together. So thank you for helping me out in that situation. Now, the morning started off pretty awesome. I got to see Jeremiah from Bigfoot Society. Jamie Snell was right next to me along with his partner Jen, and Easton Hawk supported the show, friend of the show. He's been on the show a few times, and he was like one row away, I think. Let's see who else was around. There was Cassie's Land was right next to me. Asher's from On Wednesdays We Talk Weird was at the end of the row. Just all sorts of people. Mark Muncy was somewhere from Erie, Florida. He was across the room. I actually didn't get to say hi to him, unfortunately. Ryan Sprague was also there. Wanted to get to talk to him, but when you're doing these events, I normally do them solo. One of these days I gotta convince a friend or someone to come help me come help me out. But yeah, there are a few people I wanted to do a quick chat with. I did get to do a quick chat with Jim Harold from the Paranormal Podcast and Jim Harold's Campfire Podcast. Super nice dude. And Lyle Blackburn was there. Ken Gerhard was there too. Didn't get to talk to him, unfortunately. The whole crew from Small Town Monsters, they put on this amazing event. They're awesome folks. If you've never checked out a Small Town Monsters documentary or any of the series they do on YouTube, I mean, their stuff's everywhere. They're doing some high caliber work here, talking about legends and myths and cryptids and the paranormal and UFOs, aliens, you name it. It's definitely pretty awesome. I got to see Aaron Deese, who was just on the show, Alex Petikov. Yeah, just a lot of folks were there. The day started out pretty strong. Got to chat with some people and see some familiar faces too. So if you're listening, you know who you are. I see it's interesting. You see a lot of people at these different conferences, and they travel too. A lot of them are coming from faraway places, and it's always nice to see a familiar face and nice to meet new people too. And yeah, the hotel conference ballroom got pretty hot in the afternoon, and I figured people were probably into various workshops and listening to lectures from the different guest speakers and all that. But I found out later, I noticed outside that it was raining pretty hard in the afternoon, and apparently I found this out later. There was a tornado warning, and so a lot of the vendors were just kind of hanging out, and it was pretty quiet. So at that point in the day, it was getting close to the end, and I was able to do a few rounds and chat with some folks. But yeah, overall, it was a great event, very successful, and hopefully they'll be doing it again next year. And my next event is going to be Squonkapalooza, and that's happening on August 10th in Johnstown, Pennsylvania. So that'll be an awesome event. I believe it's rain or shine. It's in a park. I'll have more details as the date draws closer, but you can also check out my website, strangeology.com. I do have an events calendar there for the events. The only other event that I'll be doing this year is going to be the Whitehall Sasquatch Calling Contest and Festival. It's this really cool, awesome outdoor event celebrating the Beast of Whitehall that happened, this big sighting that happened back in the late 70s, early 80s, where some police officers responded to a call about this hairy wild man wandering around, and they saw the thing. And yeah, it's an awesome event. So if you're in either of those areas, definitely check out those events. Come find my tent and say hi. It'll be a fun time. Now, before we get started with the episode, just wanted to throw out a couple quick reminders. As always, don't forget to set up your podcasting app to auto download so you never miss a new episode. And don't forget to follow Strangeology over on all of my social media accounts. You can find me on Instagram at strange.ology. TikTok and Facebook, and YouTube is just Strangeology. I'm also on X and Threads as well for more content, giveaways, and all of that. Also, make sure to check out my website, strangeology.com. I do have a blog there with a bunch of articles. You can also sign up to my mailing list to receive occasional updates and promo codes for my Etsy shop if you're ever looking to support the show via merch. And I've got a whole bunch of stuff you can check out. And as always, the best way to support the show is to tell your friends and anyone who loves the strange and unexplained. But if you really love what Strangeology does and want to support me, the show, you can always become a member by heading over to patreon.com/Strangeology for as little as $1 per month. Any support helps out a ton and helps keep the lights on at Strangeology HQ. Higher tiers unlock more perks like early access to episodes that are also ad-free, as well as access to my members-only episode extension, Strangeology Beyond, which is sometimes a whole other episode and research topic in and of itself, or a extended guest interview, as I've been focusing a lot on guest interviews lately. So we get to hang out with the guests for quite a while longer, and we just have fun with it and get wild. There's also a merch discount for my shop, as well as exclusive merch, voting to power, bonus content. There's also a t-shirt of the month club, which gets you a brand new Home Estate Cryptids collection shirt each month. And gosh, there's probably 5 or 6 years worth of designs in there. So if you want to join a growing community of like-minded people who are into Forteana, the strange and unexplained, it's a great place to be. I appreciate the support, and the more of it that I get, the more content that I can create for all of you out there. And to those members out there, thank you so much for your continued support. It means the world to me. All right, that's enough of that. Why don't we get into today's episode? For this show, I brought on a brand new guest, Nash Hoover from Chasing Legends. This was a really cool and interesting conversation all about his process, his team, researching cryptids, and a few other fun things. So I think you're going to enjoy this one. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. All right, folks, welcome back to the show. Joining me today is Nash Hoover. Nash is a paranormal and cryptid investigator, adventurer, and is the host of the documentary series Chasing Legends over on YouTube. Nash and his crew get out into the field to speak with witnesses, experts, and conduct real-time investigations at the sites of many of our favorite legends. So thanks for being here, Nash. So glad to have you on. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Yeah. Thank you for having me. It's an honor and a pleasure to be on your show.
Yeah. I know we went through the gauntlet a little bit of like trying to get this scheduled, and both of us have some pretty crazy schedules. So very glad to finally have something work out here.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. It's been what, like a month and a half, maybe,
something like that. Yeah. That's the way it goes sometimes. But yeah, I gotta know, as with most people who are into this type of stuff, what sparked your interest in the unknown? Was there a certain moment in your life or a book you read that you were like, there's something strange going on out in the world and I want to get to the bottom of it?
Yeah, so it all started, it's probably in, I think I was maybe 7, 8, 9 years old, elementary school library, and I just happened upon a book about Bigfoot. And I was intrigued by it. So obviously, I was just a young kid, early 2000s. There really wasn't a whole lot out in terms of, paranormal cryptid TV at the time. So I was like, oh, this is interesting. So I kind of read into it, and it just sparked something, kind of like, as you said. And from there, I started coming across books about Loch Ness and started coming across books about UFOs. And I was checking out books on the subject so frequently that my elementary school librarian just basically went around and found all of the books that were like on this sort of subject and just set them aside for me to just take from when I needed them. And she even like would order in like books specifically for me to check out. And then as kind of cryptid TV started getting more popular with Monster Quest and like Destination Truth and all those shows, things got broadened for me, and it became kind of a global obsession. And it just has been kind of a snowball effect ever since.
Yeah, that's great. I love that, you had these books set aside for you. I went through like kind of a similar thing myself, where at the school library, I was always gravitating towards books on Bigfoot and UFOs, Loch Ness Monster. Although I didn't have anyone setting aside those books for me personally, but grew up in a small town. So people are probably like, who's the weird kid? But yeah. So how did Chasing Legends get started?
So, the last weekend would have been our 11-year of kind of when the idea sparked. And then, yesterday was like the 10-year anniversary of when we actually like officially announced the series to the world. Because we had worked on it, or we shot an episode kind of shortly after the inception of everything. But so had kind of always, so I got into filmmaking in high school, and then I got into ghost hunting with a couple of my friends, kind of like, I think it was like end of junior year into senior year. Me and a couple of my friends would just kind of go around graveyards and stuff in my small town, Minnesota. And
Sure.
I got into the filmmaking and stuff like that. So I was going to go to film school, and the cryptid stuff was always still kind of back of my mind. And I actually met completely out of the blue, just met some, her name was Caitlin Keeley, and she lived in Massachusetts at the time, and we just somehow connected online, and, we're the same, her birthday was yesterday, Friday. And so we were only like a month and a half, difference in age. And we were both, kind of fascinated in the same stuff. So we'd always kind of talked, joked about creating a show or whatever, but it never went anywhere because obviously there was distance between us, and her and I never actually like met in person until 2015.
Interesting.
So 2013, May of 2013 was, I think it was back when Animal Planet had their Monster Week. And I was watching that god-awful mermaids mockumentary that they made a few of that tried to pass off as like genuine whatever.
Yeah. I think there's a clip that makes the rounds every once in a while where they're like, oh, it's a real mermaid. And you're like, no.
So I was watching that, and they had kind of mentioned a case that I had remembered from watching Destination Truth, which was the Carrot Yam Israel mermaid case. And I had remembered from that episode when they were talking about on the Animal Planet thing that there was like $1 million reward offered by the city of Carrot Yam to basically find indisputable proof that this existed. So I was texting Caitlin with Caitlin at the time, and was just telling her about this just awful documentary. And I had brought up this, the $1 million reward thing. Like, we should go. Like, let's just go. Let's fly to Israel and see if we can get this reward. And then my filmmaking mindset kicked in. I was like, well, we should document it. Let's make a documentary of us trying to prove that this mermaid exists. And it kind of just went on from there. Like, it was entirely joking around. Like, there was no seriousness. We weren't, trying to jump online to book tickets or anything like that. Well, then the conversation gravitated towards, her and I had discussed trying to do some sort of a series at some point. And I was like, well, what if we just did that? Like, what if we just made that one episode of, a cryptid hunting paranormal series? So, we kind of talked back and forth for a few weeks, kind of came up with a slight game plan for it. Obviously, we were living, a time zone apart, and, about a 1,500-mile distance between us. So getting together, and we were like fresh out of high school, so money wasn't readily available to us. And
sure.
So basically the plan was that I was going to essentially assemble a crew of people that I knew in the area where I lived, and I would kind of get some stuff going. And then once we could bring her on board, she would she would come in as a co-host. So I was watching, we knew we wanted to incorporate legends in the title, but we couldn't come up with like a really solid name. We kind of kicked around quite a few ideas. And I was actually watching National Geographic used to have a series was hosted by Aaron Ryder, who was on Destination Truth, called Chasing UFOs. And I was watching that, and I'm like, that's it, Chasing Legends. And I texted her that, and she was like, that's perfect. So then that's when that came into play. And then in July of 2013 is when we shot like the very first episode of Chasing Legends, which was the Ghost of El Tunnel episode, which that was never supposed to see the light of day.
Really?
We basically were just like, here's a spot nearby, because at the time when we created the show, we were going to do both ghosts and cryptids like Destination Truth did, but rather than having like two cases an episode. We were just going to focus on one thing, like every episode, just so that way we could spread it out. And so I always joke with people that the first episode of my cryptid show was a ghost hunting episode. But there was this tunnel that me and my couple friends had always gone to in high school to investigate, and it had some weird stuff happening, and there was a lot of local lore, and we're like, well, it's perfect. It's 15 minutes from where we all live. Let's just grab what camera equipment we have, which was not much at the time, and let's just go down there and we'll shoot something, and we'll just kind of see how it looks.
Yeah.
That way we can kind of decide if we want to pursue this further, or if we should, maybe just be done with it, because it might be more to take on than we can at the time, which it was. But so we went and had all this crazy activity happen, and camera battery died a lot earlier than it should have, and kind of just gave the episode a really kind of like a sinister cliffhanger ending that wasn't intended, but we just kind of were like, all right, well, I guess that's it.
Yeah, that's a wrap.
We went home, and I think I just kind of whipped it together. I think I edited on Windows Movie Maker, and then didn't know how to properly export it, so that's why it exported it in like 480, so it's like super cropped on like a 1080, and I didn't even think about going back and fixing it. And then we threw it up on YouTube, and the rest is history.
Right. Yeah. Those first excursions out and experimenting with the whole thing is always, trial and error. And it's just kind of like a fun thing. Right. So no, that's awesome. I'm glad you had something close by. I mean, all these small towns everywhere have local legends. I'm just a few towns away from the Vermont's Northfield Pigman legend, which I'm not sure if you've heard of. I've covered it a few times on my channel, but yeah.
Oh, so you're not far from Northfield, Vermont, and I live in Northfield, Minnesota.
Oh, no kidding. That's interesting. Now, can you walk me through the process of how you research and vet potential cases before you get the crew together to go out and investigate?
Yeah. So in the early weeks after we created the show, me and one of my friends, JC Yang, sat down and we kind of compiled a list. Caitlin obviously threw her own stuff in too. And that was kind of everyone kind of knows me for having this list of cryptid cases that I want to do episodes on, which is now currently, I think, at 75. At the time, it was not many. And it was basically me sitting down, binge watching Destination Truth again, which I was very mad about doing, and kind of taking ones that I thought were interesting and thought that there was more that could be done, and kind of adding to the list. And then obviously we did, we looked around Midwest because we knew we weren't going to have any money to really travel. So we're like, well, we got to try and drive to most things.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of how we did it back in the early days. It was kind of was more what we could do very cheap and easy. Now it's a lot more of a rigorous process where, myself and Carrick St. Laurent from Crash Course Cryptozoology sit down, and he's, been a huge help because that guy can find things that I've just I'll be like, hey, I'm stumped on something. I'll send it to him, and he'd be like, oh, here you go. I'm like, okay.
Yep.
So him and I usually sit down, and I'll include some of my crew, but nowadays most of my crew are strictly production. So they are just kind of there to make it rather than, kind of participate in it. So a lot of the research stuff is on me and Carrick. And so we kind of sit down and, my rule is if we can find one person to interview, we're good. If we can get more than that, great. If we can find one and that's it, fine. If there's enough story there to tell, like with the case in point, the Rougarou episode that we shot, we could only get one guy to interview. Obviously, COVID really made that more difficult than it needed to be.
Right.
But the guy we got was fantastic. And then we had, the guy that took us out in the boat in the swamp that, was able to kind of give us some personal stories, which was not planned. He just had them. So that's kind of our rule, is if we can get one person that can speak highly of the case and give us enough information to justify. And then obviously we need to be able to ghost and have a fight, basically have a place where there's enough sighting reports where we can kind of zero in on a investigation site. And that's pretty much it. As long as it's got a good story, we can get one interview and there's a place that's not going to be impossible to get to look.
There you go.
And that's kind of how we decide. And then, funding is usually the the big kicker, but that's kind of that's really the decision. Like the list that I have of the ones that I would like to do, there's a few that in there that won't, just because they don't have, they don't basically check all three boxes.
Yeah.
Whether it be, they'll have a good story and a good, a known investigation area, but there's nobody we can find between Carrick and I that we can actually talk to. Or, the investigation area won't be clear, or there's not really much of a story there.
Right.
But yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm a cryptid paranormal researcher before I'm a, TV personality. But obviously we're doing this as a produced show. So there kind of has to be that, that angle. Obviously if it was just me going out and trying to see if I can find evidence, it'd be way different. But when we actually have to tell a story and justify bringing a crew of 6 people along.
Yeah. It's a process. It's a production for sure. How long does it usually take to film everything when you go out on a case?
When we first started, we pretty much did everything in a day. The Ghost of Hell's Tunnel episode, I think we shot that in 4 hours, just because obviously it was close. And then the Lake Pepin episode that we did in 2014, that was over the course. I think we started it at 9 a.m. and shot until 5 at night. And then the Devil's Punch episode that was shot, I think we pretty much started at that we had to drive a little bit for. We started 2, I think it was 1 or 2 in the afternoon, and then filmed until midnight. But then when we got into the 4 most recent episodes that we shot in 2020, those were 3-4 days each.
Gotcha.
Including travel, and we some of them we were able to give more time to. We wanted to make sure that we had 2 full production days and then 2 travel days, and then if we could have a day in between, great. But that didn't always happen. So basically, we would leave on a Thursday, come back on a Sunday, and then shoot as much as we could in that basically 2.5 days of availability, which is super tight when you're trying to get a lot of stuff. So moving forward, we basically said that we want to try and give ourselves 5 days, 2 travel days, 2 full production days, if that's all that's required. Obviously more if there's something that we really have to kind of go out for, and then a day in between production and travel to just not do anything.
Right.
There's been a lot of because we end the last night is always our investigation, and then so we're investigating until 12, 1, 2 a.m. and then we're having to fly out at 9 a.m.
Yeah.
to come home, and can be a lot.
Yeah. Sounds like it can get a little rough. Yeah, having that extra day built in is definitely helpful, I'm sure. Yeah. So Chasing Legends has done a lot already, but it's been on hiatus for a few years, but it sounds like you're ready to get back to it soon and potentially be bringing things to a whole new level. What is that process looking like?
Yeah, so we had a lot of plans going into basically after the release of the episodes we shot in 2020, we released everything in like February, March of 21. And then we had plans to pretty much I think June of 2021, we pretty much were like, we're going to hit the ground again and start filming again. Well, then I found out I was going to be a dad. So that kind of derailed things there. So I was like, okay, well, I can't, I've got to be here. Because in my mind, I was like, we're going to do basically what we did in 2020, but times 10 and just be, longer expeditions. We were going to attempt to do international filming. And so I essentially was like, okay, well, kids are expensive, so I'm not going to be able to really pay for this myself again. Obviously we had help with the Kickstarter campaign that we did, and that covered, at least it basically covered our flights for the 4 episodes we shot. But I and everybody else still pretty much had to throw in their own money to take care of the rest. So I was like, well, this is, I don't really want to keep making the people that are working for me pay to do, to work on the show. And so I was like, well, I'm going to start pitching this around, shopping this around to see if I can get, it picked up anywhere. And then someone else can just front the bill for the production because we've got everything else pretty much figured out. So we hooked up with a company, and they were okay. I don't really think they quite understood how to sell it, even though I laid it out for them pretty clearly. And it just never really seemed like it went anywhere. And then we dumped them and went to a different company that was a lot better to work with. And then it really came down to them kind of just having to step away from developing concepts to focus on other things within the company, which I understand. I still am in contact with them. So there was no ill, no harsh feelings or anything. So then that was up to October of last year. So pretty much since April of 21 to October of 23, we were locked in with somebody where we couldn't do it on our own, even if we wanted to, which we did. Kind of got to that point where we were like, we just got to do something. And the first company was like, no, we don't want you to waste money and resources on a pilot that might not go anywhere. And it's like, well, it's just more content. What?
Huh.
And then, so yeah, and then once we were free, come October, it was like, okay, well, let's get back at it. And then, so we had basically created a plan for this year to film that has kind of been derailed pretty hardcore, mostly just because of everyone's scheduling. We were supposed to shoot an episode in March, and we had an Airbnb rented in northern Minnesota. We were going to film an episode up there. Everyone showed up Friday night. Everyone was great, excited, ready to go back to work. And then Saturday morning, I woke up and was just super sick.
Oh no.
And I was down for almost 2 weeks.
Oh, wow.
Pretty much just packed up that morning and we're like, I can't even pretend.
Oh.
There's no way. What sucked because the plan that we'd worked really hard on putting everything together and had a pretty cool kind of, it was going to look a little bit different than what we've done in the past, and it was going to look a lot more polished and more like a show. So I'm hoping we can, everyone's schedules can work out here at some point, and we can at least do one of the 3 that we were going to attempt this year.
Yeah.
Because we were going to basically shoot 2 or 3 episodes around here that we could do with, little to no money, and then put those on YouTube as kind of like pilots, and then do another Kickstarter to do like a big season 2. Yeah, it just, universe had other plans.
Right. Well, maybe there was a reason for it, and hopefully, schedules with everyone will work out soon. There's always something that can be worked out for sure. But yeah, that's too bad. Sorry to hear that you got sick and it just derailed the whole shoot. That is just such a bummer.
Yeah,
for sure, man. Well, hopefully you'll get back to it soon, and I'm sure it'll be great, because I've watched your episodes, and it's awesome to see you and people like you that get out in the field and actually go to talk to people. That's not something that I do really. If I'm at a convention or something, I might talk to people that have a story that come to my table if I'm vending, or if I go talk to some other TV personality like Cliff Barrickman or something like that. But it's it's always great to see people doing things and getting out there, getting their hands dirty and all that. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing, what happens next for you guys. I'm wondering, in these like small communities, you mentioned that a lot of the times you might only find one person that's willing to talk, and that's good for you. That's fine. As long as you get one person to talk about it, if they're passionate, knowledgeable, that's great. It seems like a lot of these small communities that have legends of creatures, paranormal activity, and that kind of thing, they're always kind of wary of outsiders, and they don't want to talk about their secrets. Is it a hard process finding these people, experts, historians, that kind of thing? Do you usually reach out, or does Carrick reach out to find these people? What does that look like?
Yeah, so I handle all of that. So I personally reach out to everyone, and basically just I explain what we're doing. That we're an indie production. This isn't going to be something. We're not going to make you sound crazy. We're not going to we're coming out of genuine curiosity, and I always leave my phone number. Shoot me a call. I can explain this better if you whatever. And yeah, we haven't had anybody that was super standoffish or was like, no way, I want nothing part of this. Everyone we've reached out to has been like, yeah, that sounds great. Let me know when you're coming. Which has been great. So yeah, there's been a few people that we've reached out to for stuff that we've wanted to do that, we're yeah, I don't know about that. I don't really want to talk about this sort of thing. We had one a while back that basically had never been interviewed by anyone before, but had probably the greatest evidence of what we were looking for, and then was like, yeah, I'll talk to you, and then when it came down to it, just ghosted us and didn't answer our call day of. So we're like, okay, that's fun.
Maybe not the best lead. Yeah. So yeah, well, it's good that you haven't run into too many roadblocks in that department with finding people to talk to. Yeah, I imagine that's probably the biggest hurdle to justify actually going to a location that has a legend. Now, a lot of places have had these legends that have persisted for decades or even centuries. What do you think compels people to hold on to these stories and pass them down generation after generation? Is it kind of like a, you know, a pride thing or a tourism thing, or just like, what do you think it is about human nature that kind of keeps these stories alive?
I think people just like good stories. And, you know, I think in some cases, you know, some of these things take on almost like a boogeyman effect. Like when we were in Ireland researching a case back in 2018, and that was kind of what everyone we talked to, that's pretty much how it was explained to them growing up, was that it was like it was used as kind of a don't do this, or, you know, it's going to get you kind of a thing.
Sure. Yeah.
Which I know we kind of have in the States too. I know Rugru was kind of one of those ones too, where it was more, that was, other than Pukwudgie, out of the 4 that we shot, that was probably the one that was like more rooted in folklore than real life, anything potentially biological. And, but again, you know, South Louisiana, you know, Cajun folk, they, you know, have a lot of lore and a lot of stories, and, you know, that's just kind of part of their culture. And everyone we spoke to down there was very, you know, they were like, you guys are nuts, like going out looking for this thing. It's like, oh yeah, that's the job. Going out
into the bayou
at night alone.
Yeah. I mean, never mind a cryptid. You also have to worry about other wild animals too. Yeah, that actually kind of makes me wonder, you know, what's been one of the most, I guess, chilling or inexplicable thing that you've encountered when investigating a case? Have you ever actually seen anything that you couldn't explain?
Few times. When we shot the Mugia Monster episode, we definitely had, like, there was something moving around, you know, around my search team, and then Alex Pedikov and our camera guy Brian had something, because we split up. So it was Alex Pedikov and our cameraman Brian stayed at camp, because with the story of the Mogollon monster, it apparently is, you know, it's kind of lured in by camps, and it can be somewhat aggressive. So they were kind of bait, if you would. And then my search team of myself, Eli Watson, my cousin Michaela, and then our sound guy Jack and camera guy Sammy were out, you know, away from camp to get some distance between us. And we both had things kind of happening individually between us that were, you know, it seemed like there was something, and it almost seemed like it was like luring us away from each other.
Interesting.
Like it was the sounds we were hearing were taking us one direction, and then the sounds that Alex and Brian were hearing kind of like off in a different direction. So it was intelligent almost.
Yeah.
But we never saw anything. Like, I never picked up anything on the FLIR. The forest floor up there is like so dense and packed, like you wouldn't even be able to see tracks if they were there. So it was weird. Alex is we're pretty sure that he had some sort of a wood knock. He kind of got audio of it. It was hard because it was distant. It was pretty distant away.
Yeah.
So that was kind of weird. When we shot the Lake Pepin episode back in 2014, which we're nearing the 10-year anniversary of that time, but we thought we saw something. Definitely was an unusual wave pattern. Something was moving against the current that we tracked for probably 30, 40 seconds, and then it disappeared. So that was probably like the first and only like physical, you know, sighting of something that we potentially had. But yeah, definitely a lot of noises, and just some kind of eerie feelings. But yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, Ghost of Hell's Tunnel, we had, you know, some pretty wild, you know, paranormal activity, but
yeah,
as far as cryptids go, yeah, I'd say Lake Pepin was probably the weirdest, or in terms of actually seeing potentially something.
Yeah.
Something that fell in line with eyewitness reports.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's so many lake monster legends, right? And I'm sure a lot of them can be explained, but there's some that are just have so many witnesses of people seeing something that's just like doesn't fit what the zoological record. So you got to wonder like what's going on, there. So yeah,
well, I was always on the fence about Champ until I actually went out there and spoke with people that live on the lake, and they're like, "There's something out here, man." And I'm like, "All right,
yeah,
you got me. I believe." Like,
I know. Yeah, that's my backyard. I grew up in Chittenden County, Vermont. Always heard stories. I've never seen Champ myself, but I mean, you've got the Sandra Mancy photo, and I mean, I think I heard like one of my brother's friends or something like that were out on the lake one day when I was a kid, and I remember hearing that like, oh, they saw like they think they saw Champ like swim by their boat when they were fishing. And it's just like this big animal that they couldn't identify.
Everybody we talked to out there either had their own firsthand sighting or knew somebody that had a sighting. Everybody we talked to.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. One of these days I should probably go and just hang out. I haven't been up to the lake in quite a while, but yeah. No, it's there's something there. It's funny. I had Alex on my show a while ago now, and I was asking him about, investigating Champ because, he's done work on it too. I can't remember if he was on your episode or if it was, yeah. And he was saying this theory about how it could be like a giant snapping turtle or something like that, which I'd never heard before.
I definitely buy into the turtle theory.
Yeah.
To me, that's like the only thing that makes sense. Like, because obviously plesiosaur is always like tough.
Right. Yeah.
It's like the fact that you have sightings on land and people almost describe it as like seeing like a rounded like shell like breach the surface. And
yeah. I mean, it does make a lot of sense. And I mean, you've got like the Beast of Busco in Indiana that people think was a giant alligator snapping turtle, or the ogua from West Virginia, which is theorized to be the same thing. I don't know if they come up as far as New England, but I mean, Lake Champlain communicates with the Atlantic Ocean through the St. Lawrence Seaway, so something could potentially get up there, or come up through the Hudson River from New York and through all the, but it would have to go through the all the lock systems that that can rise and lower that go up through the state. But yeah, now obviously you've done some investigation in New England. You've also looked into puckwudgies.
Yep.
I'd love to hear about that if you can tell my listeners. Did you go into like the Freetown State Forest in Massachusetts and all that? Like, yeah, let's go.
Yeah, so that was one that came from the early days of Chasing Legends because Caitlin lived in Massachusetts. And so that was it was one of her main contributions. That was always one that we had kind of talked about doing. And I think 2015, we had originally planned on coming out there and shooting out there, and it ended up falling through. So that was kind of one that we always wanted to do. So when it kind of came time to us doing this right, I was like, well, we've got this, like, let's just do it. And, unfortunately she didn't live in Massachusetts at the time. She has since moved to Ireland. So Puckwudgie is a Wampanoag legend, out that way. Kind of described as a kind of a porcupine goblin looking creature, about 3-4 feet tall, supposed to be, able to conjure fire, and they have like spears and bow and arrows, and, they kind of take on native appearance, but also looking completely different, obviously. And, definitely more on the folklore side than anything that could potentially be biological. There's not anybody out there seeing porcupines looking like they're wearing clothes and stuff like that. It's you know. And so we went out there and we spoke with John Horgan and the late Paulino, and which was great. They were both full of knowledge and pointing us in the good direction. And I think time of year we went was March, and it was kind of tough because everything was just cold and snowy.
Yeah,
and
it's still pretty cold that time of year.
There was no wildlife whatsoever that we came across. We went out to the Asana Ledge, and which is kind of ground zero for a lot of these legends. Reports of people not showing any sort of mental illness signs that just kind of throw themselves over it and end their life for no reason. And it was kind of a weird place, and it was funny because we would speak to people that were like, yeah, I used to walk my dogs out there until I saw 3 people in dark hooded cloaks walking the distance, and then after that I've never gone back out there. And
oh wow,
the mafia used to dump bodies out there, and so it definitely seemed like there's a lot of dark energy. And we kind of reached the conclusion that it seemed a lot of people avoided the area more so because of kind of a culty worship sort of it's more of a human element than any sort of fear of Pukwudgies. There's actually a few people that we met in Freetown that had never even heard of the Pukwudgie specifically, but avoided the forest because of all of the other kind of dark stories
right, all the
in the area,
legends,
which we thought was interesting. That was kind of cool, and that was the first one that Pedicab kind of came out and helped us on. And then we actually shot that one March of 2020, and then as soon as I think 2 days after we got home, Massachusetts declared a state of emergency, and that's when everything hit the fan.
Right, well, at least you got in there right before it happened. I mean, the Bridgewater Triangle is I've actually never been, but
it's cool.
I've heard it's a very interesting place. I mean, there's also legends of or stories rather of Thunderbirds and Bigfoot, and there's UFO sightings, and
it seems like they've got everything,
sorts of stuff. It's one of these window areas that people talk about for sure. Now I wanted to to ask, so you're in Minnesota.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a favorite Minnesota cryptid, or just a favorite cryptid in general?
Favorite Minnesota cryptid would probably be Peppy, Lake Pepin Monster.
Yeah, sure.
After we shot that episode, I think I'd been out there at least 100 times in the last 10 years. I've gotten to know a lot of the local business owners and kind of some other important townspeople pretty well. It's just a pretty area, so I make it out there as much as I can. So that'd probably be my favorite one. It's not very likely to be anything, wild, but the town has really kind of embraced it and use it as a touristy thing. You get merchandise and stuffed animals.
Of course.
But it's fun. That's probably my favorite hometown one. Favorite overall, it's a toss up. I got my heart's always for the thylacine. And then I'd say followed by Mapinguari and Orang Pendek.
Oh, interesting. What's your I gotta ask. I mean, it made the rounds a week ago at this point, or 2 weeks ago. I can't remember, but those recent alleged Tasmanian tiger thylacine photos. Yeah, those were. I was pretty convinced those were AI or just.
I called BS.
Yeah,
Garrick sent me those as soon as he found them, and I was like, nah.
Yeah,
a couple of them looked okay, but then there was a few that was just the mouth was open too much, and it's just nah. It's 80 degrees. That's what you get. 80 degrees is what you get.
Wow, I mean that's huge, but yeah. What's do you think there's any really good evidence proving that the thylacine might still be alive?
There's a lot of story. I have I have a handful of contacts in Tasmania that send me stuff occasionally. And there's definitely areas in Tasmania that could still. There's areas in mainland Australia that still could. That it's less likely because Tasmania went extinct on mainland Australia quite a while before.
Gotcha.
They went extinct in Tasmania because they were outcompeted by the dingo for food, and then Tasmania didn't have dingoes, so they were able to thrive until they were deemed a nuisance by local government and punted to extinction.
Eradicated, yeah.
In 1936. So yeah, I don't know. You get stories occasionally in Australia. More so seem to come from Tasmania, so that's kind of where I'm still holding out hope. But
yeah,
unfortunately, if there's a small extant population, there's going to be a lot of issues of inbreeding.
Right.
So they're probably not the same animal that we would have remembered. But I'm hopeful. I know that's one that I actually have a. I guess I'll kind of mention it. There's something that Carrick and I have been working on that's a larger project focused on thylacine that will be probably maybe hopefully announcing for sure by the end of the summer.
Cool. You heard it here first, folks.
But their range extended all the way up to Papua New Guinea. I think that's probably where they're more likely to exist.
Yes, I remember hearing something about that recently.
Just because of how it's probably that whole island is essentially like the lost world. They find new stuff there, new species there all the time, and it's not been very well explored.
Yeah.
So there definitely could be some extant populations that are just thriving, how they have always been. I know there's always been rumored reports of local villagers up the mountains that talk about striped dogs and all this other stuff. So that's where I would, if it wasn't so difficult to look, that's where I would put my money on. But Tasmania, I think, still has a lot of wild area left that there could be. There's a lot of, southwestern Tasmania is pretty much entirely uninhabited.
Right.
So there's a lot. There's still a lot of space.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's amazing when you just think about, people are so used to living in populated areas and they're like, nothing's out there, but they don't realize even on an island as small as Tasmania, which it's not like small, but it's not exactly a huge island, but, there's tons of space out there for things to hide, and new species are being discovered every day. So who knows, so they could still be out there. I guess we'll see if someone actually catches some legitimate video or photographic evidence, it's so easy to fake things these days. So
yeah,
that's kind of a bummer that,
made our job harder.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Now, have you ever done any research into stuff like Dogman, Beast of Bray Road? You're pretty close to like Wisconsin and Michigan and stuff, but yeah.
So in 2015 we went out to Bray Road, and that was the first time I'd ever seen it in person, and then my whole opinion changed. So we tried to shoot an episode out there, but it just didn't work because there's nothing. It's Bray Road. You could throw a fucking rock and you wouldn't hit anything. Like it's a totally rural road. There's no habitat. There's nowhere for anything to hide.
Yeah.
So in my mind, if Bray Road was what they think it was a one-time, one-off thing. I know there's always been reports of sightings after and before, but again, I think it was just something moving through if it was. And then we went back in 2019 and we were just going to do Dogman overall, we touched on Bray Road, but we were just going to focus on Dogman overall. And we actually casted a like significant sized canine footprint.
Interesting.
Out in the forest, which was cool. I still have that. It's in that lamp shelf thing behind me. Yeah, I mean that's and that was on our plan for this summer too, was to go out there and actually do a proper episode on Dogman. We found a wolf sanctuary that was out there that we were going to go film at and actually observe wolves in person. And I mean, I don't know, the Dogman thing. It's tough. I mean, I believe people believe they think they saw something, but it's hard to convince me that it's some sort of large, bipedal canine. And I don't even want to we don't have the time for me to go into Bray Road because I just, yeah.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a complex thing for sure.
Yeah. I mean, Dogman believers are passionate. I mean, it's sometimes a little more passionate than Bigfoot believers, I think.
Yeah.
In terms of really grasping for anything that could be.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I've certainly heard things and talked to people that have had some opinions on things and opinions on other researchers and all that stuff. So yeah, it's a whole interesting can of worms for sure. Yeah. Now, do you think that any of your investigations have helped to rewrite or I guess better understand any of these legends for people?
I don't know if we've personally made a difference, but I know after we released our Mogia Monster episode, now all of a sudden I'm seeing more people talk about it. I feel like it was because I think even before we shot that one, I was talking with Jeremiah Byron from Bigfoot Society and told him about it. He's like, I'd never heard of that. And then he, is now, kind of in on it.
Yeah.
And I don't even remember how I came across that one even to begin with. It just was, that's one that's always been on my list. And then I was like, well, I love Arizona and I love Northern Arizona. So let's go.
Yeah, for sure.
And, yeah, all the ones, I mean, Rougarou 2, I think there's a lot of people that haven't really heard of that one. And that's our most viewed one out of the 4. I don't think there's really anything that we've done that's brought any new info on, sort of things. I mean, I think there's been, we've definitely done ones that, and I enjoy doing the lesser known ones, just because they haven't really been overdone.
Right. Yeah.
People always ask me, are you going to do a Mothman episode? I'm like, no, because everybody and their grandmother has done something on the Mothman.
Right.
It's everything. If any story that's needed to be told has already been told 20 times, Yeah. And
you gotta give the D-list cryptids some love sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely am. I'm not against going out and looking for, some of the big gun ones. Obviously I want to do a Jersey Devil expedition, but I feel like there's still more work that can be done there. Yeah. But yeah, Carrick and I always seem like we enjoy coming across the obscure, lesser talked about ones because they're usually ones that we are going to have to work for.
Yeah.
To really find, at least in the research department, find enough to justify.
Right.
And even if we can't, then we've still put a lot of time into researching something cool that we kind of just set aside for later.
Right.
If we
yeah.
need it. But yeah, I think that's kind of why we, I personally enjoy researching the international stuff just because I feel like there's a lot more substance to some of these. There's a lot more cultural significance and potential. There's a lot more bridging that gap between biological and something metaphysical. A lot of the people, the citizens that live in the Himalayas almost worship the Yeti as some sort of god. And, you kind of find that in some other cases around the world where it's, worshipped and revered as kind of something, and it's could be something, some of these stories could be passed down memories of when, certain creatures existed, kind of like how I feel with like the Mapagari, where I think, if it's something that still exists, it could still be Megatherium, giant ground sloth, but it could also be, passed down stories of by the ancestors that were around when the Megatherium was still around.
Right.
Talking about these massive creatures that, could basically push over trees and what have you.
That makes a lot of sense.
It just, it creates story potential, which, I'm a storyteller as well as I'm a, researcher.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where I enjoy going, is because you can learn things. You kind of look, it allows me to kind of look at some of these stories through a different lens and appreciate them a little bit more when you kind of see that, there's not a commercial element to it like there are with a lot of the cryptids here in the States.
Of course.
It's just a genuine, story. And yeah. No, it
definitely keeps things interested, or interesting. What's your, do you have a favorite case that you've done so far?
Champ's definitely up there. Mohiam Monster, probably. I think from an episode standpoint, I think Rugru is probably my favorite in terms of just how it looks, but that is mostly because Eli edited the whole thing. It's just, I edited the investigation portion because I like doing that for whatever reason. But he edited like everything up to that, and I think he is a fantastic editor. And was able to really paste things together. But that one was one of our longer shoots, so we had a lot more footage to work with. Obviously, we only had one interview, but there was we did a lot of stuff. Boat tour and the daytime and nighttime swamp excursions, and there was just a lot there that he threw together and made into this really cool thing. My favorite expedition was probably Mogollon. That whole area was just beautiful, and I feel like we hardly scratched the surface of where we could have gone. I actually originally planned on going like way deeper. Like I was going to follow some of these like fire roads super deep to like get away from everybody, and it would have been impossible given the amount of time that we had to pull everything off, because we would have just been too far out.
Yeah, it's a big area out there. I've been out to Payson before, and just outside of town, and like was hanging out at some campsite area, and I was like, well, this feels like Bigfoot's going to come out any second. And we weren't even that far out of town. Oh, cool. Yeah, it's a really beautiful area for sure.
Yeah, it was crazy because we went to Arizona in July, so everybody brought like warm weather clothing, and there was a 20-degree temperature drop between Phoenix and Payson. So it was like in the 70s when we got to Payson, and then from Payson about an hour, like maybe 45 minutes to the top of the rim where we were doing our investigating, was another 20-degree jump. So when we got on top of the rim, it was 50s and raining, and nobody was dressed for it.
Oh no!
So we ended up having to go back and do like a Walmart run so everyone could get like rain jackets and sweatshirts and stuff.
Yeah, it's funny. You think you go to Arizona, you fly into Phoenix, and it's like 100-something degrees, and then you go to the northern part of the state, and it's like really nice weather.
Well, see, and part of that's on me though, because like I was the one watching the weather, but I had set my weather for Payson, so I was like, oh, it's gonna be in the 70s, it's gonna be great, So that was what I told everybody. I'm like, dress for 70s, and then we went up and.
Yep. Well, lesson learned, I suppose.
Yeah, but yeah, that's other than Champ, that's Mogian is probably the one that I would do like a follow up
Oh yeah.
episode on.
Yeah, that would be great.
Just because I feel like with Mogian, there's a lot more ground to cover. With Champ, I feel like we weren't able to do as much as we wanted to just because of COVID restricting.
Yeah.
And because we were originally supposed to have a boat, and then that fell through. And then the guy that we interviewed, that his wife had a sighting like days before we showed up, was like, well, we got a couple kayaks. You want to do that? We're like, I guess. And then we, out trying to film in kayaks in 400 feet of water.
Right. A little sketchy.
Fun.
What would you say is, aside from follow-ups, what case do you really want to investigate that you haven't done yet?
Thylacine, but like I said, we're working on that.
Sure.
I don't know. It's tough. There's so many that I like. There's a lot of dream ones. Like obviously, I'd love to go to Amazon and do Mapangwari. A couple in the States that I would like to do. Skunkgate has always been one that I've really wanted to do. Honestly, I think like Africa, either Mingwa or Nandi Bear or like Hangamato, like something in like the kind of central Rift Valley area.
Oh, that would be
the
interesting.
high plains of Africa.
Yeah,
I don't know. Africa's just always had my heart. I've never been, but it's just kind of been. I've always been drawn to just the stories and the lore that have come out of Africa. So yeah, I think that would be kind of a dream. But again, those ones follow into that category of investigation site, good story, no one to talk to.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Hey, maybe someday. Do you have any advice for people who, want to get into doing stuff like this? What would you tell, some college students who are really passionate about cryptids and they might want to start their own production investigation team?
Don't do it. No, I'm kidding. I don't need the competition. I would, I honestly just do it. I mean, we were, I was 18, almost 19 at the time of this. My friend Patrick, who I brought on the show, was, same age as me. And then JC and Michaela that I brought on were still in high school, so they were 17 at the time and just wanted to do it. And we made it work. And it'd be easy. It's easier now than it was when we started because, technology is a lot more, there's cameras are a lot more affordable. And, YouTube and, TikTok and all that stuff is, it's, if I had access to everything that's available now 10 years ago, I think I would be, in a much different spot with this.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, it's, there's a lot of great people out there. Network. That's probably like the biggest piece of advice I can give because there's no reason to do this alone. And most of us are very happy and willing to share our knowledge and pointers and expertise for things. I haven't really found anybody that's been like super standoffish or gatekeepery. Everyone that I've come across has been pretty great and more than happy to teach and learn. So yeah, networking would be the biggest thing. Just, there's a lot of great pages. Yours is fantastic. Carrick's is great. Obviously check out any of the Small Town Monsters stuff. Those guys are all pretty good.
Yeah.
Cryptozoology Facts on Facebook. Her page is fantastic. A lot of great cryptozoology facts on there.
Yeah, I got to meet her.
If I can plug some friends.
Weeks ago. Yeah. Yeah, it's a great community for sure. A lot of supportive folks. Absolutely.
yeah, and there's a lot of great podcasts out there. Yours, Jeremiah's. I'm blanking on other people, but everyone's got a podcast these days, it seems.
Oh yeah.
So just find one and listen.
There's lots out there.
And then message that person and say, hey, this is what I want to do. Where should I start?
Yeah.
And then you'll find this episode and hear me explaining it. Network, cheap camera, YouTube channel.
Just do it.
And a friend. At least a buddy. Don't go into these places alone, damn it. Pedicop does that stuff and I don't understand it. Well, I don't think he does anymore, but he did.
Yeah, he just took a crew up to this abandoned radar, Cold War radar station as part of, I think, one of the new UFO, chasing UFO episodes that he's doing for Small Town Monsters. And that's in Vermont. It's in like the Northeast Kingdom, which is like a sparsely populated area of the state. And it's like a 10-mile hike to get up to this mountain where this thing is. And
yeah, he's nuts.
Yeah.
I'm all for it, but yeah, he's hardcore.
He is.
What I've always, it was fun working with him just because he was not afraid. I knew that if I was like, oh, this is what we have to do to get to where we got to go. And he was, right there. Yeah. Great researcher.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Well, this has been a super fun conversation, Nash. Can you tell my listeners the best place to find Chasing Legends and all your stuff online?
Yeah. ChasingLegendsCrew.com is kind of like the one-stop shop that'll give you all of our episodes are on there, crew info, social links, all that's on there. You can follow me on Instagram at Nash Hoover. Chasing Legends is at Chasing Legends Official on Instagram as well as Facebook. And head over there, shoot me a message if you got questions, and happy to chat.
Great. Well, can't wait to see what you guys do next. And thank you again for coming on to the show today, Nash.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thanks again to Nash Hoover for coming onto the show. I really hope that everything gets worked out for some brand new content for these guys. They're doing great work already, and sometimes good things take a while to happen, and good things come to those who wait. But definitely check out Nash's stuff. I will link all of that in the show notes. As always, I want to give a huge thank you out there to everyone who checks out my show. Those of you who download it, share it with friends and family, spread it by word of mouth. It helps me out so much when you do that. The Strangeology podcast wouldn't be possible without the support of listeners like you. To any advertisers or companies out there looking to collaborate with the Strangeology podcast, please send all business inquiries to info@strangeology.com. Additionally, if you are an author, researcher, experiencer of something strange and unexplained, from cryptids, the paranormal, UFOs and aliens, ancient mysteries, conspiracy theories, what have you, and you want to share your story, you can also send me an email at info@strangeology.com. I'm also starting to look for new listener stories. So if you do have a story and you'd like to share it, there could be a chance that it could be featured on a new episode of the Strangeology podcast. Definitely send your stories in. I'd love to hear about them. And again, if you haven't yet, make sure to give me a follow over on all of my social media accounts. You'll find me mainly posting short form video content on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and Facebook. I do a lot of short factoid type videos on cryptids and conspiracies and all that stuff. People really like it. So I'm trying to put out as much of that as I can, and I do have some longer form video content on my YouTube channel. I post the podcast there as well, and I have plans on expanding the longer format videos soon as well. And definitely don't forget to check out my Instagram for the occasional merch giveaway. It's been a minute since I've done one, but I'm planning on doing one very soon as the show approaches 500,000 downloads, which is just kind of crazy to say that, but you all are awesome, and from every corner of the globe you're listening to my show, and it just means so much to me, and I got to give back every once in a while here, so definitely stay tuned for that. It's coming real soon, guys. And if you're looking for another way to support Strangeology, you can check out my Etsy shop, strangeology.etsy.com, where I have a whole assortment of cryptid, alien, and Fortean gear that's available on t-shirts, tank tops. It's the summertime, so, tank tops are a big hit. There's also long sleeves, sweatshirts, hoodies, and I've also got, there's so much stuff. There's stickers, magnets, prints. I've got my Homestate Cryptids map print, and initially it was an 18 by 24, but I also have a larger size, a 24 by 36 available now. I've got mugs, tumblers, drink coolers, enamel pins, and more. And I'm always trying to add new design ideas and get that into the mix as often as I have time. So you definitely want to check back on the shop frequently. And yeah, so that's strangeology.etsy.com. Thank you so much for your support. All right, I think that's all from me for now. I'm going to take a quick break here. Nash was able to hang out for just a little while longer to talk about more of his experiences doing Chasing Legends and some really creepy stuff that he has personally experienced with some of the more paranormal side of things. So you're not going to want to miss it. Patrons, stick with me. And for everyone else, until the next time, take care of yourselves and each other, and keep it strange. All right, Patreon members, welcome back to your exclusive portion of the show, Strangeology Beyond. Really great to have you on today, Nash.